Coming up on CarAdvice, Australian auto engineering, Jez Spinks sits down with Kia's Australian suspension guru to discover how Kia is improving vehicles for Australian conditions.
The iconic Toyota Corolla. We reveal our pick from the Toyota 2019 Corolla lineup.
Towing a caravan for the first time, our tips to keep on track out back this summer.
Hello, I'm Trent, Nikolic. Welcome to CarAdvice. Thank you for joining us again. With me at the desk, Paul Maric.
Hello, mate.
Good evening. We've got a big show tonight, including taking a look at Kia's local engineering platform. So we're going to have a look at what they do to remanufacture suspension systems for Australian conditions. We're going to take a look at the Toyota Corolla 2019 range. So we love doing this at CarAdvice. We'll tell you which model of Corolla you should be buying. And we've got some hot tips for people who are going out there buying a caravan and heading off on the road for the first time. Big news for Tesla. They have a new chairwoman, which is good news for the company because they've been without a leader effectively for a while. Elon got himself into a bit of trouble and it's taken them a while to replace him at the head of the table.
Twitter seems to be undoing a lot of people
Stay
here.
off social media.
That's it. So just as a bit of history there, Elon was investigated and charged by the SEC and he was ordered to pay $20 million, and so was Tesla for the tweets he made with regards to taking the company private, which you weren't allowed to do. He was also told to step down as the chairman. So in place of him now is chairwoman Robin Denholm. Now, she may sound familiar because A, she's been part of the Tesla board since 2014 and also head of the audit committee.
Pretty quietly too. A lot of people wouldn't have known she was part of Tesla for that long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But more recently, she was with Telstra. Get those two confused. Where she was the CFO and head of strategy. So she comes from a tech company. She has previously worked in auto at Toyota and across Silicon Valley. So I'm hoping that she brings to the company the direction they need and also the communication strategy. For God's sake, stop tweeting, Elon. Please.
Well, you'd think coming from a company like Telstra that's very conservative, these big businesses like that in the communications industry, very conservative, very staid, they'd have 55 checks before their CEO would put out a tweet.
Policy for a policy.
Policy for a policy, exactly. You would imagine that Robin's going to be very much on top of the way that Tesla positions itself publicly, I would have thought.
Absolutely right. And it's now an important time for Tesla. With all the hot water they've been landed in, they need someone who's stable and they need someone to give the company direction. We saw on our recent trip to SEMA, there are Teslas everywhere in California and Nevada. So it is important for them to keep that up and get the cars to Australia and get them across other markets. So let's see how it goes. Fingers crossed this is the time for them to step forward.
One thing we can say is the Tesla experience works in a place like California where there's a network, you can drive the cars, charge them easily. Absolutely works, makes a hell of a lot of sense. So I think whichever way you slice it, it's interesting times ahead for Tesla. Next up, a segment that nobody's interested in, Paul. No one's buying them. No one cares. Dual cab utes.
No, that's it. And last year, definitely the Ranger and the Hilux weren't the top two selling
cars. They weren't at all.
Australia.
Now, I thought I was reading things when I saw this. Ford and Volkswagen dual cab ute collaboration. Now, we've said for a while at CarAdvice that in an overall sense, the best dual cab ute is actually the Volkswagen Amarok. The problem is it doesn't have the second row safety with no airbags. It doesn't have some of the electronic safety features that a vehicle like the Ford Ranger does have. So we can't give it the win in any of our comparisons. We can't recommend that family buyers access an Amarok because of that. I'm staggered that a company like Volkswagen that has the reach and the breadth of development that it has would consider using something like a Ford Ranger as a platform for their ute.
You know what, I'm not as surprised.
Really?
And here's why. So Herbert Diess, the CEO of Volkswagen Group, has said and opened the door to potentially collaborating with Ford on the next generation of Amarok. Now, if you've been following Amarok, it was released in 2010, which in the grand scheme of cars and models is an eternity ago.
Long time.
So we're expecting a replacement but haven't seen anything. So this would open up doors to Volkswagen to get a platform like the T6, which is what the Ranger's built on. T6 is also the platform that the next generation of Ranger in the States is built on. It is an impressive platform and it means that Volkswagen doesn't need to spend money on this. They can get an excellent platform and then supersede the Amarok with a nice car.
Is Volkswagen, though, saying we don't know how to develop our own dual cab ute that's competitive? Are they saying, we're admitting defeat here and we'll just use someone else's platform?
It is kind of saying that, but it's more so saying that Ford has a bigger opening there to spend more money. Like T6, if you look at the markets it's in across Southeast Asia and now the US, Volkswagen can't possibly spend that kind of cash on Amarok when they don't really sell it in that many markets. So you jump on the Ford bandwagon, stick a Volkswagen badge on it, Bob's your uncle.
And you know what? If you look at what Ford does in the States with the F-Trucks, there's absolutely no doubt that that brand understands dual cab utes. Onto a subject, Paul, that'll put us out of a job. Autonomous vehicles. If there's no drivers, you won't need to test drive a vehicle, will you? And you won't need to report on what it's like to test drive. Yeah, well, there you go. Just enjoy it while it lasts, because we haven't got much longer. This is an interesting study. Will buyers pay more for an autonomous vehicle? So what you're actually doing is you're paying more in one way for less, if that's the theory, because you don't get to drive the vehicle. What did the study actually come to?
This is going to surprise you, and I know you'll completely disagree with this, but the study found that men are willing to spend $12,000 more for an autonomous car, but women are willing to spend up to $17,000 more on a car that will drive itself.
Really?
Now, you're laughing there.
I am laughing.
My wife, Abby, she doesn't like driving. So if she could hop into a car and type in a destination and away the car goes, I don't even want to know how much she'd swipe that credit card for. But it does show you that some people, I know you and I love driving, and it's our thing, but
I wonder whether this is a generational thing. I mean, if you're over the age of 35, for example, and you're really into cars like we are, and you're into driving, surely you're not just going to say, yeah, I'll have a car drive me around. I mean,
but what if you were like, if you're on a highway or something, wouldn't you like this on occasion?
Only if it works. I've had cars in autonomous mode before, and they've decided to change lanes, take an exit that's not there, shift over into a car next to me that's in my blind spot. Yeah, I'm just sitting there not touching anything. I don't know if I trust autonomy. I've got a bit of a worry with it. I mean, it's the way of the future.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. But you can understand that these systems are foolproof. What they should have said is, will this happen in your lifetime? No.
Look, if it does, and I'm sure they are working towards it at the moment, Tesla claims that they have all the hardware there but not the software yet. So, I don't know. Let's see what happens, but it's an interesting study nevertheless.
Plenty of CarAdvice readers and viewers won't want to hear this, but regardless of what we think, I reckon autonomy is the way of the future, and at some point we'll be sitting in a car and it'll be driving itself. If you log on to caradvice.com or you watch this show, you will have heard us speak extensively about local engineering. Local ride and handling, local suspension tuning. There's actually a hell of a lot that goes into this kind of thing, and there's no surprise, obviously, that for Ford or Holden or Toyota that were building cars here for a while, that they were doing it. However, manufacturers that are full importers like Kia have been doing it for a while as well. They bring cars to Australia, they retune the suspension and ride system to suit local roads, and this is a big sign of respect and reverence for the Australian market and how important it is.
And for you guys at home, this is confidence in the product, because they're spending millions of dollars and spending money on local talent to make this happen. And I think it's super important when it comes to buying your next new car.
On that note, our colleague Jez sat down with suspension guru Graham Gambold, who works for Kia, to find out exactly what goes on.
Thanks, guys. So yes, I'm with Graham Gambold from Gambold Engineering, who has been working for Kia Australia for nearly a decade. Graham, thanks for joining CarAdvice. This has been a fair investment from the company. Why is it so important for them?
Well, they're one of the companies that contest this market, that understand that this market's very different to any other market in the world, and especially from a vehicle dynamics point of view. Our road conditions and our driving habits require us to have quite a unique suspension tune.
It does seem that Australia has some of the worst roads in the world, you know. What is that?
Well, we've only got 25 million people and we've got 880,000 kilometres of roads. 80% of those are rural roads, so spray seal is the preferred road construction method, which is basically just a dirt road with a bitumen overspray. So our roads tend to be rough and prone to maintenance issues and everything. So it's a pretty demanding environment, and our speeds are high. You know, people drive at 100 kilometres per hour on single lane country roads. There's not too many other markets in the world where we have that requirement. And good, passive, stable vehicle dynamics is very important for this market.
Why did Kia choose you, Graham? Because I think you've got quite an interesting background.
I've worked in the motor industry in test and development my entire working life, but also been heavily involved in rallying and motorsport. My involvement with Kia actually came through Neil Bates in his Toyota Rally program. I was working in that program.
How do you go about, you know, tuning a Kia vehicle, particularly for Australian roads?
It's become a reasonably polished process now, but in the early days it wasn't so much. we start by having a very good rapport with the design teams in Korea, and we ask them for, and they're very good at presenting us with very early design data on what we call the suspension kinematics, which is the fundamental geometry and hardware of the chassis. They present all that up front, and we can put a lot of that data into our in-house simulator, and that calculates some rates and motions of the vehicle before we've even driven it. So it starts with all that information coming down, putting it into the computer. From that computer data, we can pretty much understand whether the car's going to be poor ride, understeer, oversteer, whatever, and then we can make our first iterations. Then we go up to Korea as step 2, and we do a competitor benchmarking program and a first tuning opportunity for about a week, working with the engineers at the Nanyang Research Centre. We then package up that final spec, bring it back to Australia, put it into what we call our first prototype, which is about 12 months out from production. Put that suspension in and then bring engineers down to build the special shock absorbers and spend a pretty consolidated 2 weeks of focused tuning on local Australian roads. Then that specification that comes out of that program gets fed back up to the suppliers in Korea. They make what we call off-tool sample shock absorbers and other components, send them back down to us, and we do a validation to make sure that our prototype car behaves, well, the sample car behaves the same as our prototype level. And then we sign off, and then once we've ticked all those boxes, it gets locked into an engineering program in Korea to go into production.
What are you looking for, for Australian conditions and Australian drivers? Because we know they have a very different preference to, say, US drivers or even Korean drivers, who tend to prefer that softer, more underdamped feel, where you definitely want a firmer, sportier feel for Australia.
We talk about our requirement in Australia because of the rough roads and the higher speeds as being a little bit like a rally car. We like modal separation. So we like to separate the vertical motion from the lateral. We want good, strong roll stiffness because that gives us stability and confidence in the car. And we want compliance so the tyre doesn't leave the road or has a good interaction with the road surface.
Electronic stability control tuning would be a vital part of your process as well?
Fundamentally, we have what we call low co and high co. So low coefficient of friction and high coefficient of friction tuning parameters. For Australia, we have an in the middle tune, what we call gravel strategy in the ESP software. We do a bit of tuning in that area, but more importantly, once those parameters are drawn and tuned by other departments, we try not to touch them. We try to stay just tuning the suspension, and the suspension has a great influence on stability control activation. So if the suspension's too hard or too loose, if there's uncontrolled low frequency body motion, that'll trigger the ESP because the car will see vertical accelerations spiking outside the defined windows and switching the system on. So if the light's flashing a lot, that's typically the suspension influencing the ESP, not the other way around.
We talk about Kia models moving on, and how they've developed, they now have, more features, are safer than ever before, but the way they drive is, it's a quantum leap from over a decade ago. Now we're seeing Kia hire executives and development specialists from the likes of BMW's M Division, from Porsche. What kind of influence are you seeing from their involvement now?
They influence the fundamental design, which is stuff that we can't really do from this small market. They can give us some great chassis fundamentals, and Stinger's a perfect example. That's a
great car.
Great car, completely world-class chassis design and components, and that makes your job that little bit easier, and it gives you a greater tuning window and a more defined tuning window at the same time.
Graham, it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much.
Having spent so much of my childhood in the garage with my father tinkering on cars, I absolutely love that kind of stuff. It's really, really cool. If we did a vox pop with 1,000 people and asked them which car gets their pulses racing, I reckon 1,000 of them wouldn't say Toyota Corolla.
Spot on.
Yeah, fair to say. However, incredibly popular car globally. Yeah. It's overtaken the Volkswagen Beetle as the most popular car of all time. It's unbelievable. credit to Toyota, and it shows they're obviously doing something right. So it was inevitable that we would do a Toyota Corolla range review with the new 2019 model at CarAdvice, and that's exactly what we've done. We'll tell you about the models that we've got here first, Paul. We've got the Ascent Sport, $23,000.
So that's a base model?
Base model. SX Hybrid, middle of the range, $28,500. And then the ZR Hybrid, $32,000. There are some crucial differences, though, in the driveline. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so when you get to the entry level, it's all about a 2-litre petrol engine. But then as you step up through the range, you get hybrid. Now, this is cool because hybrid used to be a ground that was exclusively held by Prius.
That's right.
And it was expensive. Now you can jump into a Corolla at the mid-spec with a hybrid drivetrain, and it gives you the benefit of fuel economy. So we're talking 4.2 litres per 100 kilometres in hybrid form. And that is achievable as well. It's not just some fluff figure they come up with.
Absolutely not. I've been driving the mid-spec one around in really heavy Sydney traffic for about a week now, and it's 4.6 litres per 100. It's been jumping between 4.5 and 4.6. I haven't been trying to drive it efficiently. I've just been driving it normally. That's a real-world figure. The reason we mentioned the boot space, though, is that there are some little technicalities here that we've picked up when we're going through all these specifications. The base model, the entry-level one, write this down. The entry-level one is the only Corolla that's got a full-size spare wheel. So it's got a full-size alloy wheel with a normal tyre on it. All the others, up to the top spec, have a temporary spare. So we can
that's
recommend
a reduced section tyre.
Reduced section tyre that you can only do 80 kilometres an hour on. So we can recommend them to you if you live out of the urban area and you have a little bit further to travel. The one that's problematic, which has a bigger boot consequently, is the top spec ZR hybrid that has a tyre repair kit. Now, I don't know about you, but if I break down on the side of the road with a flat tyre, I don't want to be fixing it up with a tyre repair kit. It's not really ideal.
Can you imagine that? You pull over, you go to get the spare.
There isn't one.
I've got this can of goo. I don't know what to do with it.
So I think that's why, ultimately, with the ZR hybrid, we love the drivetrain. It's really nicely put together. But if you live anywhere out of the inner city, you've really got to look further back down the entry level of the range. So the big difference for us, though, is in the equipment. Standard equipment, what you get, what you don't get. We think that the SX Hybrid, the middle of the range, is the pick.
Absolutely.
And we think it's the pick because you get the hybrid drivetrain, which is better. Even though it's a smaller engine, it's better than the bigger 2-litre engine. You've been driving one around, you know how that works, and it's a good thing to drive. Feels good.
Yeah, exactly. And that's partly thanks to the architecture. TNGA, Toyota New Global Architecture. Mouthful of words there.
I had no idea what that stood for.
But what it means, it's a platform that's shared across a number of new Toyotas, including the new Prius. And it means that Toyota can dedicate all of their R&D into one platform. And then as a consequence of that, you get hybrids and all the other stuff that you can get on the more expensive cars, on the cheaper cars. It also means it rides beautifully and it handles beautifully as well. They've done a tremendous job here with this platform.
And we'll get to the spec changes in a minute, but if you look at the images here,
how good do they look?
They look amazing, and I think that's really a good point. That Toyota was criticised for a long time for the Corolla being boring and conservative, didn't look too good. I think the styling looks amazing.
I could see you in one of those, a nice red one.
I couldn't fit in the back seat though. There's not enough room in the second row. The reason we've said that the SX Hybrid in the middle of the range is the pick is because that $28,500 mark is really sharp value for money. So the top spec one's $4,000 more. The differences, 16-inch alloy wheels up to 18-inch. Do you really need that?
No.
No, around town it's probably going to affect the ride a little bit, so go with the 16s. You do get a nicer, in inverted commas, interior in the ZR Hybrid, so you get leather accented seats, heated front sports seats. But I've got to say, having driven the SX, I think the cabin's pretty good in that one as well.
Absolutely.
And then there are some other little tech changes like a head-up display, which, you know, is excellent. Works really well. It's a good addition. Is it worth paying that extra $4,000 for? Probably not. You do get a bigger screen in the ZR Hybrid as well. I don't know whether that quite justifies the $4,000 either.
Given the Toyota infotainment system isn't really that good, a bigger screen just amplifies that. But you do get great features in the mid-spec like wireless phone charging. That's a tech that I absolutely love because it means you can just put your phone on a pad and it charges.
No cables.
It does miss out on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto though, which is disappointing. I would have expected to see something like that on the Corolla, especially given the market it's targeted towards. You've got to have these features to get younger buyers in.
Absolutely. Now look, we reckon that safety obviously is a huge deal, but it's even more important in this particular segment where people are really, you know, juggling their budgets. The best part about the SX, all the same safety gear as the range topper.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worth, if you are looking at a Corolla, to try and bargain a longer warranty. Toyota is stuck in the Stone Ages
with
with
their
a 3-year
3-year
warranty.
warranty,
They should be offering longer. So if you do want to go down the path of a Corolla, you can see our range review at the CarAdvice website, but see if you can bargain in an extra warranty there as well.
Absolutely. So the CarAdvice pick, SX Hybrid, $28,500. Send us an email and let us know if you've bought a new Corolla, which spec you went for and why. But also let us know if there's any other range reviews you'd like to see. We love doing them. It lets us drill down into the details. 500,000 caravans registered on the road in Australia. Wow. Big number. I was staggered when I saw that number. And I tell you something else that blew me away. At one of the big caravan and camping shows I went to, I spoke to one of the biggest retailers of caravans in Australia. And he said to me that nearly every single person that buys a caravan from their yard, the first time they tow anything is when they tow their caravan out the front gate of the dealership. So you're loading up a 2.5, 3 ton thing on the back of your SUV, and off you go, never having towed anything.
That is incredible. And it goes to show that you really do need extra training when it comes to doing this type of thing. Everything changes. Overtaking, handling, braking. It's all a very foreign concept to people that haven't done it before, which is why there's a few key concepts here. And the first one is making sure you get the right ute or SUV to do all of your towing.
Well, that's the thing, because we see that these vehicles have tow ratings. So they have tow ratings, they have downbore weight on the tow ball. There's a whole bunch of technicalities that we've explained at caradvice.com. However, don't assume that a vehicle with a 3-ton towing capacity is fine for your caravan that weighs 2,700 kilos, because by the time you load it up with clothes and water and supplies and, you know, gas bottles and barbecues and whatever else you're taking, it's no longer a 2,700 kilogram caravan. So often the vehicle that you buy or choose to use as your tow vehicle is just as important as the caravan. You've done some really interesting testing though, and I want you to explain 2 of them. One is the Bosch software for vehicles that tow caravans, and the other one that blew me away when I watched the video is the Land Rover that has the reversing system that helps you reverse a caravan. It means you almost don't need to know how to do it anymore, doesn't it?
Bosch has said that there's 1 million registered caravans and trailers in Australia and 12 million in the US, which is why they invested a lot of money in developing a stability control system for trailers. So Bosch is the pioneer and leader of stability control systems in cars. They've now migrated that to trailers, and they have done a spectacular job. We had the chance to go to the Australian Automotive Research Centre in Anglesea to see it in action, and they showed us a car that had massive outriggers on it, and what they did was a lane change manoeuvre at 100 kilometres an hour.
With a caravan.
With a fully loaded caravan. And what the system was able to do was break individual wheels and bring that to a halt without damaging any cars. The crashes you see with caravans getting out of control are incredible, because when it goes pear-shaped, it goes pear-shaped badly, and often it's during an overtake or with oncoming traffic. The second system you mentioned there is reversing. Now, if you ask any bloke, they know how to reverse without any problems in the world.
Until they back into a fence.
Until they back into a fence, or they're at a boat ramp with people watching.
That's it.
So the Land Rover Discovery and a few other cars on the market have an incredible feature, and you can see this at caradvice.com, where the vehicle is able to reverse for you with a little joystick. And I was able to parallel park caravan in a parking space just by using the joystick.
Were you able to parallel park the caravan without the system?
Of course.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly.
So this type of technology, while it may be stuff that people don't want to admit to using, it makes it incredibly handy when it comes to touring and also for parking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the big thing with towing for us is it's the same as any kind of driving. It doesn't matter whether you're driving a car, riding a motorcycle, whatever it is. We advocate as much training as possible.
Absolutely.
So assume that you've decided which vehicle you're buying and you know which caravan you want, and those two match up nicely. And this could even be the case for a big boat on a trailer as well, any kind of big load that you might be towing around. Once you've worked to that point, we recommend that you then look for some kind of advanced driving course or training course specific to people who tow.
Yeah, exactly. It's critically important. And make sure that if you are going around Australia with your partner, they do the same course.
That's right,
because even though you may drive most of the time, there could be a time when you're tired and someone else needs to take over. Anyone that's driving needs to be doing the course, because while it does look simple and straightforward, it isn't quite that simple. And a note here to other drivers, if you do see a caravan on the road, make sure you give these people room. It's just like a truck. It takes extra time to stop. You don't want to be cutting these people off. And if you do see that they are struggling in traffic, give them a bit of room.
And I think a lot of the focus with caravans is on the low speed stuff, manoeuvring around corners in town, reversing, hitching it up, getting in and out of tight spaces. But these courses will teach you more about the way the caravan changes the behaviour of the vehicle. Because if you're doing a lap around Australia, you're going to be spending a lot of time at 80, 90, 100, 110 kilometres an hour on the freeway, and things like crosswinds and road surfaces can make a real difference to the way the caravan behaves, and then that changes the behaviour of the car. So I think these courses that teach you that are vital for that reason.
Exactly. Have you learnt anything by towing a caravan or a trailer? Advice at caradvice.com. Let us know, because we're keen to hear some stories. I know everyone has one.
Yeah, 100%. That's all we've got time for this evening. Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Trent.
Join us again next week, 7:30 p.m. on Your Money.